Welcome to Rocket Ship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of Galaxies.dev and as well your host of today's show. Today we're gonna have some exciting topics because first of all, Expo SDK 53 was released. There's a lot to talk about. Then we got some pretty cool new packages that I want to mention that I picked up on X. And then there's also big news for every iOS developer out there. So a lot to cover, also some personal stories from behind the scenes. So let's get started with the React Native Radar. Before we dive into our first section, a quick note that the Zero to Hero mission on Galaxies.dev is now complete. You can find it at galaxies.dev/missions, and there you will find the overview about our entire Zero to Hero mission, which will help you to get started as a React Native developer, as well as acquire all the required skills to use state management, use different UI libraries, fetch data, work with authentication, and more. So the course is complete. It has about 13 hours of content, and pretty much everyone who has been through the course loved it so far. So if you want to brush up on your React Native skills or want to get into the game of building native mobile applications, this is your chance. Galaxies.dev/missions. And with that, let's dive into our first section. So Expo SDK 53 was released. This is one of the major releases. Usually Expo releases, I think, once or twice a year on SDK. So this is usually quite big news. I've already done a whole video on everything in that SDK, which you can find on my main YouTube channel. So in this podcast, I will just highlight a few of the important pieces, but if you want a complete overview, go to that video. So probably notable things are, this includes React Native 0.79, so latest version, which also means you can use React 19. You can also use React 19.1 by setting a specific flag, which allows you in turn to use used and other cool things. So really, the best and latest tooling is now available for your Expo applications. This is always good news. It always feels good to be on the same page as React web developers and just having the latest tools available. The new architecture is now the default everywhere for new applications. I last week shared a story how I had to fight with a new architecture. So it's not easy going for everyone. All the blog posts and everything makes it look like the new architecture is the best thing on earth, and maybe most of the issues have been resolved by now, but I can definitely understand how some people say, no, I still can't upgrade to the new architecture because XYZ. Just keep this in mind. For new project, it is now the default, and it's definitely a good idea to invest time into seeing if your application can be brought to the new architecture and made work, because most of the packages today should be compatible with the new architecture or some sort of the interop layer. So give it a try. I highly recommend it because in like 1 or 2 years, you don't want to be around with the old architecture anymore. Then they also rolled out edge-to-edge support for Android devices. If you're not an Android user, you probably don't even care about this, but this pretty much means like your application can expand beyond the status bar in the bottom area, and it just looks a lot better. And this anyway has to be the default for specific Android versions coming in like the summer, so good news for you. The rest is like a lot of improved packages, background tasks. There's a Maps package, Expo audio packages, different packages, Expo SQLite now on the web, some CLI and EAS updates making it faster. There are web workers, Expo Atlas is stable, a bunch of these cool tiny things. And then there's one big news around the new package called Expo UI. So on this podcast, when Beto was here, we talked about this briefly, and it is now here. It is an experiment. This is absolutely an alpha stage. And I think I went through the docs twice or 3 times, and every time there was something already changed. So be really careful. But under the hood, Expo UI gives you access to some core primitives from Swift UI and Jetpack Compose. For example, a button or a date picker or a select component. Now, this is pretty cool because React Native doesn't really have these things in a great kind of way. And Expo UI will now give us direct way to access these components. I don't know if we talked about this before, but pretty much you can like bring up an Expo module In that Expo module, you define a Swift UI view or a Jetpack Compose view, and from there you can export something. And that's pretty much how Expo UI works, as far as I know, under the hood. So they're just like re-exporting that stuff through Expo modules, so we can easily import and use it in our code. Now, a couple of things. First, as I said, this is absolutely alpha stage, so really, really early days. Second, I gave it a try, and it is quite limited. So there are like 8, 10-ish components at this point. So don't expect this to be a replacement for Tamagui or whatever kind of UI component you're using at this point. And third, this is kind of challenging to implement because you currently, and again, this might change, have to import all of these from the specific Swift UI or Jetpack Compose package, which means you end up gonna have a lot of like platform OS equals something in your code, or you're gonna have to do mypage.ios, mypage.android, and then use the according packages in those files. So those are the caveats. It is not perfect, but it's a great starting point. I've seen many comments under the video that Beto did a couple of weeks ago that people said like, this is the best thing, I've always wanted this, finally this is here, why did they not ship this earlier? So I think Expo definitely had a reason to make this. This is a starting point. They marked this as an experiment, and we're gonna see a lot more about Expo UI in the future. For the moment, this is just something you can test, but it's definitely pretty cool to see in reality. Now, the last thing I want to mention about the Expo SDK 53 is, or maybe let me 2 or 3 things more. There are also changes regarding Expo Router. So Expo Router is one of my favorite packages, and it has quite a short, let's say a short area in the Expo SDK changelog. It's like 6 bullet points or 5 bullet points. But they're actually pretty important. Like, there's cool stuff going on with Expo Router. I gave the new stuff a try, so there's a redirect component. In fact, I've been using that before, so I'm not entirely sure what's new, but this helps to build authentication flows quite easily. Second, there is a guard function. So you can now have something where you define your stack screens, and you can have a group of stack.protected screens with a guard function that evaluates, for example, a token or whether a user is signed in. And therefore, this whole part of your stack will be guarded by that function. I think this is a great addition if you build any kind of authentication system. The only note is that this is front-end authentication, and you always have to make sure your backend is protected as well. So there are always things that probably people can get around. So this is just like, I don't know, it's not a construct for your comfort. It really helps that people don't access the pages they shouldn't access, but again, make sure your API is secure as well. On top of those guards, there's also a prefetch function, so you can prefetch links or buttons or whatever is on that page that routes to another component, another page in your Expo application. You're going to see that it preloads in the background. They also have something that they called a virtual route navigator now. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen more docs on this, but I think it solves the problem with authentication when you have in your top layout file some sort of auth logic that doesn't evaluate immediately, so you're not rendering anything and therefore see an error on your screen. I don't exactly remember what that error was called, but you always had to render at least like a slot, and then the Expo documentation, the FAQ said, okay, bring your authentication logic a level down, and it looked a bit messy, and I really hope that this virtual route navigator makes that easier. At least it says make authentication and other flows using an initial redirect easier to build. So I really hope that's the case. There are also some deprecations about different packages, nothing too crazy. And one thing that just kind of went like somewhere in between is that React server functions are now in beta. Previously, you couldn't use them with EAS hosting. You could only use that locally with a CLI and play a bit around. And now we can finally use this. I'm really excited about this. I want to do more content on this now that it's in beta because it opens up many possibilities. I've talked before about this thing that your API keys are not safe in your app, but you can use API keys safely in those React server functions in the server-side environment. And if you combine this with your app, there are pretty interesting things that you can do, especially regarding payments and Stripe, and that's something we have to talk about at the end of this episode again. All right, again, check out the full video on my main channel if you're interested in like all the updates from the SDK 53. I don't want to rate SDKs, they're always good. Maybe I liked some in the past more than this one, but it's a solid release and I hope people won't have too much problem updating. Now, 2 other packages from the React Native world that I found this week. One was from Shimon, he was also on the podcast before. They're introducing the React Native AI package. Run LLMs on device with React Native and Vercel AI SDK. This is quite cool because usually, you have to talk to OpenAI, Gemini, whatever, Claude, some kind of API, and it will always take time. Now, with your own models included on your device and the comfort of the Vercel AI SDK, this is pretty wild because you can like instantly get results. So if you're into that game, I haven't built my own LLM. I'm not that deep into that stuff yet, but there are tons of free LLMs, I think, that you can include as well. So go check that out. I will drop all the links as always in the show notes. I think this is a really cool package. It already has 300 stars on GitHub, published by ColdStack. So go check out React Native AI. And as far as I know, Jamin Holmgren actually had that domain previously. So Simon said, thanks to Jamin. I think he had the domain before. Jamin, why didn't you do something about this? That is such a great name, such a great package. Come on, Infinite Red, you should have done something with that. Anyway, you're doing a great job anyway. Now ColdStack has it, React Native AI, go check it out. Third and last piece from the React Native radar is the React Native Web GPU Worklets example. Christoph from, okay, now I don't want to say something wrong, he's working at Software Mention, right? He shared a little demo of using reanimated worklets and then running Web GPU and Three.js on the UI thread. The package is also available on GitHub. That's the great thing about the React Native ecosystem. You can get everything, React Native, Web GPU, Worklets. Cool example of how you can use all these great technologies together today. I'm anyway excited about the work that's currently going on with Reanimated. So you probably heard about this before, that there are these worklets in Reanimated that run stuff on the UI thread. The idea is to extract that from the core of React Native or from Reanimated. So you have this worklets concept for pretty much everything, and you can offload anything if you mark it as a worklet, and not just like the UI stuff that's going on with Reanimated usually. I'm really looking forward to that. That's in the works. Currently, I don't see any repository about the worklets, but from what I know, this should happen this year, I think, and then we're gonna have pretty smooth worklets as well. All right, that's everything for the React Native radar of this week. As always, also sharing some tiny wins. This week, my tiny win is that my triathlon preparation is going great, and I had really great recovery and great nights lately. I just want to highlight this because I think we kind of underestimate what a good sleep, a good night can do to you. I'm doing a lot of sports pretty much every day, sometimes very intense right now, and I can feel the difference in a okay night and a really good recovery night so much. You have so much more power, you're so much more focused, everything is just so much more intense and better. It's like on the days when you don't sleep well, everything is in like black and white, and when you have great recovery, it's like you see the full color spectrum, really. Therefore, I don't really like when people nowadays post on X that, oh, we pulled the all-nighter, we've been through the whole weekend working on this fix and app, and that's just not good for you at all. Like, just get your 7 hours at least of good sleep per night. You're gonna wake up and you're gonna feel so much better. And I just wanna share this because I don't think this only applies to sports and athletes and sports performance, but I can also see it and feel it when I'm sitting in front of the camera on those days when I didn't have a good night and when I had no good recovery. I probably had a big meal before sleep that usually affects like my overall recovery. I'm like a bit sluggish, and yeah, I can get along. You will get through the day. It's not like you're dying at like noon, but if you have full recovery, if you sleep great, you just get out of the bed, and I wake up around 5 a.m., usually a bit earlier. I sit up and I'm like, let's go. Let's attack this day. I have so much fire. I want to get started. Just little recommendation for you out there. It feels great to have great recovery, to have great sleep, to wake up with like purpose and energy for the day. And on top of that, my tiny win for this week is also that I made my first long bike session. So I've been on my road bike for about 1.5 hours, 140. And then I also did a little jog for 15 minutes to mimic this triathlon like change between bike and running. And I can tell you, like, that is a strange sensation. After biking for 1.5 hours, try to run. Your legs just feel like bricks. That's also why it's called a bricks workout usually. It is such a strange sensation. It just feels so wrong to run after being on the bike for that long. But triathlon is in about 6-7 weeks. I'm pretty good. It's just a sprint distance. But my ultimate goal is to do an Ironman one day, and I think I'm on track. Built in Public is the section where I share a bit about behind the scenes of what I'm currently working on. And there are quite a few interesting things going on. Beyond the big Cologne application I'm currently working on that has really epic technology included, I'm still waiting for Apple to review my mental health application. I had it in review state for about a week. Then I decided to pull it out because I felt like it is stuck. I resubmitted a new build. Now it's stuck again. So let's wait again. Probably it's gonna take another week until something happens, but maybe Apple was just occupied with their lawsuit, which we're gonna talk about in a second. Last week I also mentioned that the Galaxies numbers aren't looking great for me right now. Right now they're back to stable, and what I noticed is I changed a couple of things, and I wanted to understand more what people like, what people are missing in Galaxies, and I tried to like survey them with exit survey. I asked in an email what could be better, and overall people are actually quite happy. I'm asking people for would you return to Galaxies, and they usually rated like 9 out of 10, which means they're not leaving because Galaxies sucks. They're leaving because their project changed, they moved on to a different technology, they learned everything they had to learn, but overall they like it. So that is good news for me. I'm happy about these responses, and also people didn't really say that anything major is missing in Galaxies. So that made me quite, well, not happy, but a bit more relaxed about the numbers. Maybe I'm just like living, the economy isn't great, something else isn't great. Maybe this whole teaching stuff isn't too good right now, I don't know. But I plan a couple of new things. And the first new thing, which is also related to building in public, is I will work on a new mission. So last year I worked for some months on the Zero to Hero course, which was released earlier this year, which guides you through like all the process from getting started with React Native to building a fully functional application, understanding state management, UI, Expo modules, native stuff, everything included. And I want to do more of that. I really enjoyed that, and I want to do another mission. And right now it looks like that mission will be React Native and Supabase building a really, really good project. At least from the surveys that I did, most people were interested in Supabase. I also asked for Firebase or different other backends, but it looked like most people currently and nowadays are using Supabase if they want to build a fancy application. So I'm definitely open to this, and I want to cover a lot of ground in that mission. So there's a lot to talk about, like the whole database concept of Supabase and integrating that with React Native. There are edge functions, how you can combine that with push notifications, with payments, with real-time data, maybe even with the vector database, AI. There's really a lot that could go into that mission, and I'm excited to work on that. And I'm also working, there's another step, with my designer once again. So Brett, if you're listening, hey, you're great. Brett has been with me since the first day of Galaxies, coming up with like the initial concept. We carved out the whole branding, the UI, he's worked on the code, he's worked on the missions design and many more things. And now we also want to take things further and probably even work on something like a suite of tools for Galaxies and React Native developers. And the first thing we probably will work on, we've kind of agreed on this at this point, is And I know most of you will say, oh, Simon, this is so boring. But we want to build a dead simple invoicing app. I know that invoicing sucks. I've used a couple of services and they're all way too much information, way too technical, way too many like tags and laws. And I just want to make invoices. And that's what we're going to do with our project. We're going to make invoicing for developers and freelancers easy. And it's going to be launched under the Galaxies brand. At least that's so far our plan. And I'm really excited to collaborate on a new project, as well as have this shared vision of what Galaxies could become. So Galaxies was always meant to be more than just a teaching platform. It was meant to be a whole brand for developers. And I'm excited that we're now taking steps in that direction in building out these, not microservices, but more like micro apps or micro SaaS or functionalities for Galaxies, for developers, mobile developers, maybe also web developers with the invoicing app. So, Brett, I'm looking forward to that. What's trending in technology this week is definitely that Apple lost a lawsuit against it's Epic Games, right? The Fortnite creators, right? So what happened? Well, I don't want to tell the whole story. You can probably check this out on the Front End Fire podcast. I'm pretty sure they will pick up the drama and explain it in full length again. I will try to condense it into a couple of minutes. So Apple fought against Epic about different things. Fortnite at one point was removed from the App Store. They sued Apple again because Apple is taking a 30% cut on every digital good sold in an application. So if you have an application on iOS and you sell crystals, you say skins for your characters in games, you always have to pay 30% of that to Apple. If you sell services and physical goods, that actually doesn't apply to those things. So that's also what I told most people in the past who asked, can we use Stripe? You actually can use or could use Stripe before for stuff if you sell like a digital good from your application. However, for everything a physical good, for everything digital, you have to use Apple's way of payment. This has stopped now. So the card, there is this ruling for this card. There's no second bite at the apple. I don't know how they could end like an official document like this. It also ends with, it is so ordered. To me in German, it sounds like it is so over for you, but probably this is just like a regular term you use in the United States. Theo made a long video about this, explaining this, and in the days after, there were countless examples on X from Evan Bacon, from Revenue Cat, from Vercel, how you can integrate, for example, Stripe in your applications now to pretty much bypass the Apple payment way. Because you can now have a button in your application. If somebody wants to buy your skin for $5, they press a button, an overlay opens, they can select and pay with Stripe. You get the full $5 minus the 2.9% and 30 cents that Stripe takes, but the rest goes to you instantly. However, everyone was pretty excited about this, and it's really cool that so many companies immediately had the solution present. They were, of course, working on this for weeks now, like Revenue Cat. They just had this post and announcement already like in the pocket, and they just had to pop it out. So it's pretty cool that you can do this. Now, the only thing I'm personally worried about is Apple has lost this, yeah. And it's cool that we can do this, especially indie developers. You can make more money now, but will there be like the Empire Strikes Back? What happens when you implement this new stuff in your application? Will Apple like kill your ranking on the App Store so your app just not downloaded anymore? Or will there be anything else that's like ugly about your app? Or will they prevent anything? I know there's a fine line, because if the jury or the laws see anything that Apple takes action like based on this new ruling against the users, then or the creators, then they would get into a lot of trouble. But Apple knows how to walk that line and probably like knows something or has something prepared for this case of losing this as well. So I don't know. I don't want to jump into this immediately and change the payment system in all my apps to make more money and get the money instantly. For the moment, I will just leave it as it is with Apple payments and doing it through Apple. It has worked over the last years. It was okay. I'm anyway not making a fortune with my apps so far, as I said in the past. However, for future applications that I will develop, I will definitely think about this and probably use either Stripe directly or the Revenue Cat solution for a web-hosted checkout, so I can just get the money from my app straight through Stripe. However, then you also need to somehow handle this, but I think if you do this with Revenue Cat, it should actually be quite easy. So yeah, I would love to know what you have to say about this. If you're on YouTube, please leave a comment. What do you think about this whole case of making more money versus Apple maybe punishing apps in the future? I'm conservative about this. I want to see what happens and how this plays out in reality and not jump the gun immediately and implement something that will kill, I don't know, the ASO of my application. But maybe that's just me being fearful. Maybe it's all great and all developers can make 30% more money, then everyone's happy. But let me know in the comments. If you're on other platforms, you can also just reach me on X and send me a DM. I would love to know what you have to say about this. If you enjoyed this episode, as always, check out the full courses on galaxies.dev so you can build your own applications. And I will catch you next week in our next episode. Happy coding, Simon. Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding, Simon.